Whoa. So you decided to get a little more serious about shooting photos, videos, you need lights, you're a content creator starting a channel, whatever it is, and you're going into Google and you're finding all sorts of crazy fanboys, trolls in comments, YouTube channels that seem a little suspicious and sponsored, and you're not sure what's honest, and all these specs are driving you crazy, you don't know what to invest in, what to even look at as far as a brand goes. Well, that's a crazy rabbit hole, but there's one spec, no matter what brand, no matter what gear you're getting into, that I think is most important, and I don't think anyone really talks about it, at least not like this. Stick around, we got some stuff to talk about. What's going on, everyone? My name is Seth Miranda. I'm a pro photographer over 2 decades here in New York. Welcome to my studio here in Manhattan. You may have seen me on some other channels like Atomos TV, but this is my own channel. So if you're into photo, video, grip, whatever, the other inside, outside, live shoots, whatever, photo nerds, video nerds, lighting nerds, whatever, you're welcome. Just hit subscribe and join the Discord. There's a 24/7 support system going on there where you can share work and it's totally free. All right, now that's out of the way. Yeah, I do some videos for Atomos TV, been doing it for quite a while, and we get to do all the product launch videos where we try out all the new gear before it's launched, so you guys get all the information about what is in our hands that just came out on the market available to you. So I feel like I got a lot of good insight as far as the way each brand does what they do, and you know, not every brand has it right. They can't. It's so subjective to the end user, and there's infinite end users, and we're always evolving as creators, right? So it's very hard to nail down, and you might have needs today that change tomorrow, and you know, this can go on forever. And you know that not every camera is for everyone. It's amazing the gear that we have today. It's incredible to me that people even complain about the gear we have today. If you're a longtime pro, you know how good we have right now, and it just keeps getting better every day. But as someone that gets to hear from the consumer, as someone that gets to try all the gear and has worked professionally and also has just been doing this my entire life basically, and I get to listen to the brands tell me their thought process to everything they've been doing with the stuff that's coming out to explain to me what they changed, why, and all the things they thought about when developing something. I think I have a pretty good insight here. And the thing I think nobody really talks about, the most important spec, I know it's not really a spec, don't beat me up on it, but the most important thing to consider, I think, is the brand philosophy. What does that mean, brand philosophy? Well, without actually calling out brand names and models here, because I don't want to cause any drama. You know, you got them all listed down here, except for like Lumix. I think Panasonic, yeah, there's no Lumix on here. Shout out to Lumix, how's that? But I don't want to really get into brand warfare here. It's not about that, because they're all trying to do the same thing, create products that we want, that we need, that will sell and give them longevity as a brand and keep this market alive, right? Well, this market's always changing and you're always changing. So when I look at what I'm going to invest into, because as a professional or even as a hobbyist that is looking to get a little more serious, you know, even if you're not going to be buying every lens that's out there for a camera or whatever, you're going to spend significant money. We're looking at like $2 grand for camera bodies right now that are doing a lot. I mean, years ago, you know, what you have in your hand for $2 grand might have cost you like $12,000, $15,000, believe it or not. But now you're still spending a good amount of money, but you're getting a lot for it. But you have to kind of decide, what are you trying to do? And does that brand's way of doing things align with you? Because as you change, look at what they do, right? So you want to consider things like brand support. Do they support you as a user? Do they have repair centers? Do they release models really quickly and kind of discontinue the old ones and don't make parts available? Are there firmware updates for the cameras that, you know, make it so that it can be compatible with a lot of things that are going out there? Like, you know, maybe there's a new trigger out there on the market that for strobes, you want to make sure that that trigger works with your camera that just came out this month. You know, there's cameras that come out that have new technology in them. And as a pro, if you start buying into it and your strobes don't fire because that remote doesn't have support that you need, well, did it really do what it needs to do as a tool for you to get your job done? You know, these are the things that you have to kind of ask yourself. Maybe support isn't the thing that's most important to you. Maybe it's about, you know, their design overall. You know, some people, there's like a whole thing about flip screens or whatever, right? Like I like a tilt screen because I don't like to shoot off access to my lens. I don't like to look through here. I know I'm always at the EVF, but sometimes in cases you do shoot from the LCD. I don't like to be out here. And I also am not crazy about them flipped out towards me, because in most cases, It can be handy in some cases, but most cases for me, it's either too far away for me to even see what's going on there, and I have cables plugged in blocking it anyway. So the trade-off for me not having the tilt that I do like isn't really there. We're getting to places where there's designs in those cameras that are starting to find both ways of making it happen, right? But we still are dealing with all these generations of cameras that are either flip out or tilt. So you got to decide what's in it for you. Do you like the way it is? One of the things I find frustrating with some brands is that all their cameras don't really have the same layout. So even if you're in the same brand, you kind of have to rewire your brain if you pick it up and go, oh wait, this dial's over here now. Oh, the switch to turn it on is on this side, not this side. Like that kind of thing kind of irks me. And if I'm a pro that has secondary cameras or a production team and we're all sharing stuff, if you're constantly having to like remember where something is because you're just grabbing on the fly and trying to work fast instead of actually getting the job done, it's kind of annoying. And that's something I consider. Or maybe I think about where they land as far as proprietary goes, right? Do they play well with others? Meaning, do they let other brands' accessories work with their stuff? Or are they so proprietary that you better buy their brand to work with their brand? There are upsides and downsides to that. If you're a fan of a brand and you go, well, I own X camera and they make X, I don't know, memory card, whatever, something like that. Yeah, it'll always work. There'll be no conflicts, nothing, right? It'll, no matter what, you know it's supported, it'll work because that's an ecosystem that they felt as a brand is more important to them than compatibility for other accessories. And you might find that great because you're very invested in that brand. Cool, that works for you. But there might be somebody that's coming from another brand or some other area and has other equipment that does work with other brands, but not that one. And that might take that option off the table. There's a lot of things to consider here. And a lot of things you can determine about where a brand is going is where they've been. What have they done? How have they acted in other instances? Have they shifted or pivoted for the better of the consumer? Or have they stuck to their guns about what they do? Do they, in the past, have they done what we were talking about, make things proprietary? Do they have support? Have they in the past done things that you think are the way a brand should act? Because remember, you are voting with your dollars. If you don't like something, if you don't like the way a brand is doing something, if you don't support it, and if less people support it, they stop doing that because they need to sell it. Right? Yeah, we've seen some brands exit the market or just quietly kind of calm down and they put things out and, you know, they still exist, but kind of not really. Well, maybe they made different decisions, right? Some camera brands might stick with this one sensor size that, well, maybe at one time it was offering a smaller form factor and it was lower cost and the lenses were smaller or whatever. But maybe we're at a point where the sensors or the larger sensors are able to be put into smaller camera bodies at the same price. Where's the real advantage here? Well, some people might still think a smaller sensor, the lenses are still physically smaller. They still like that system. Some people might be okay with the lens being a little bigger, but you do have a larger sensor and you get some benefits to a larger sensor like cleaner noise, you know, when you're at a higher ISOs and stuff like that. But then you might have another flip side of, well, if it's a smaller sensor, you technically get less rolling shutter. And that might mean video people like a smaller sensor system, right? So there's all these crazy caveats. And speaking of video people, that might be a thing too. You might hear some camera is incredible, but someone that's very video oriented might be like, yeah, but they don't consider this, or this. And therefore it's not really great for what I'm doing where I'm more serious about video. For example, some brands put things in their cameras like shutter angle. And if you know what shutter angle is, you know you want it in your camera. And I think every camera that's shooting video should have shutter angle in it. It's really just a calculator. I don't know why they don't do that. It drives me crazy. But stupid little things like that that are quality of life issues for people in the video world might lean them into a certain brand. But those same brands that are so video oriented might not be stills oriented, meaning there's compatibility issues for tethering or, you know, remotes for strobe, stuff like that. And if that's not on the table for people that are heavily in stills like I am, it might not be so much an option all the time. Yes, if you know what you're doing, you can produce with whatever's in your hand. I get it, yes. But if you're a pro, there's things that you want as far as just making it easier because you're using it every day to do what you're doing. And that's quality of life. And people have to understand that. Even something as stupid as ergonomics, where the camera hurting your hand after 8 hours in your hand is crazy, right? Or maybe you think about what do they do for build quality? You know, if you're someone that's shooting in the wilderness, do you worry about things like freeze proof? And there's cameras that actually prioritize being freeze proof. So you know, all these decisions are really what you have to look at. Look at the brands as a whole and what they're really doing and how they've done it. And then you yourself can make better decisions, not just on specs, because in the end, all the cameras, all the lighting, all the whatever, they'll always catch up to the technology. They leapfrog each other. There's never any brand that's always dominating. Something always leapfrogs. And even when you hear YouTubers go like, this company's going out of business because they don't do this, in a year, they end up doing it and somehow they didn't go out of business. Even if like 7 years they've been saying, yeah, they're going to go out of business soon. No, they haven't. They're still here. In fact, a lot of these companies have been here for over a century, which is amazing, right? Which gives you a whole track record to research a little bit of what they're doing. And then you've got to decide, well, where do I think I'm going to be going from here? Because if you're heavily investing in something like, let's say, a camera body, and you are going to then grow your lenses, right? You really like marry the lenses and date the body, right? That sounds horrible. Don't comment, don't. You usually swap out the body so that you can get the technology that's current, or things change or get better. But the lenses, they really end up having this legacy to them, right? Well, you've got to decide, if I'm a stills photographer and I'm getting harder into video, which is something that happened in my career. I never thought I'd be doing this. I never thought I'd have to learn audio or worry about getting an external recorder or 4K 30. Like I didn't care about any of this stuff when I was coming up. Now I care about it because I'm doing a lot of this type of stuff. Well, what happens when you get a little more serious, right? Does that camera system have an upgrade path to something that's maybe lower end cinema level for you to do things for clients? For example, a lot of people that I know who are in the commercial video realm have to worry about deliverables to client, meaning certain codecs, bit depths, resolutions, frame rates, even being Netflix approved. And there's cameras out there that have been sold to cinema guys that later on got firmware updates that made them Netflix approved. So if a client came to them and said, hey, we're going to be creating this and we're specifically going to be pitching this to Netflix, they can then go, oh, that's great. The stuff I work with actually is Netflix approved and they will accept our footage. So at least that, spec or requirement, I guess you should say, is already on the table. You don't have to worry about it, right? That's already a given. Now you can just get to work. These are things that matter. Does it do things internally or do you need external? Are you looking for a whole system where you just want something that's just in your hands and get going, and you're not really looking to outfit yourself like crazy? We don't know where we're going as creators. That's kind of the fun part, is our evolution of this. But what we can do is make better decisions so we're not griped and we're not stopping the process because the tools in our hand became maybe obsolete, outdated. There's things that just stop working with certain gear because it's time, right? It's just, memory cards are a good example of that. After a while, they've stopped making so many types of memory media out there, and we're finally getting into, well, SD is pretty standard, CV Express Type B is pretty standard. But for a long time, you had crazy things like compact flash, smart media. Do you remember smart media? That was crazy. XD memory, multimedia cards. It goes on and on and on. It's crazy. CFast. We saw XQD, right? We were lucky that XQD was the same form factor as CV Express Type B, and it just took a firmware update from these brands to allow us to use the newer cards, which now are getting cheaper, higher capacity, and faster, just like we always knew they would. Or there's other things to consider, like, let's talk about that memory card thing for a second. Some cameras were put out on the market with smaller buffers, meaning faster frames per second got bogged down. But the memory cards blew past this and it stopped becoming such a factor. So now all those cameras that were, got strikes on from those YouTubers for having smaller buffers, it's not an issue when the memory cards became so cheap and so much faster that the buffer didn't really matter anymore. It's almost irrelevant at this point. So it's a spec that we don't even care about so much. But it also did matter because a smaller buffer meant it was cheaper to consumer because it was less expensive parts in the camera, like bigger buffer, more memory, stuff like that. So, things to consider. What is it? Some of the things that we went through were the ports on a camera. A lot of cameras are using full-size HDMI ports finally. If you're someone that's into video or just getting an image out of your camera like I'm doing here to an Atomos recorder, it did matter because micro HDMI, everybody's got a story about that breaking. And is that a problem for you? Well, when you look at the higher end cameras, look at the brands and see what kind of ports they're putting in there. We finally are getting USB-C across the board, but there were some cameras out there that were stuck with older USB ports that couldn't deliver power, which meant you weren't using this camera right here. You wouldn't be using it as a webcam or live streaming for that matter if it couldn't take power full time, right? So you had to get a battery, a dummy battery, which could be $100, $150, and that adds to the cost, right? And then it becomes obsolete anyway when we're all powering through USB. See, I'm running down rabbit holes, but these are all things to consider, and you're gonna find things to consider also. Another side note, just to put it out there, a lot of people, when the mirrorless cameras are coming out, everybody was talking about third-party lens support. And what was ironic about this was a lot of people complained that Canon and Nikon, when they were coming out, their mirrorless systems didn't have third-party lens support. And they were right. You know, they wanted people to buy those lenses first from them before they started using third-party lenses and all sorts of things. And I'll be one to tell you, it's usually better to go native lens because the camera manufacturers know what they're doing with those cameras, and the firmware will work certain ways with native lenses, and then the third-party lenses catch up. That's a whole nother story, whatever. My moral of this tidbit here is a lot of those people that complained never really bought the third-party lenses anyway when they were able to for other systems or older systems. They just like saying things. A lot of people will just say stuff. They're looking for pain points because it's easy to pretend like you have an intellect or some sort of knowledge or experience about something by finding the negative, because the marketing is always trying to show you the positive to sell you it. But be wary of all the negative talk out there being just, you know, someone puffing their chest out and trying to be like, I know what I'm talking about, trust me. They're trying to tell you this, but it's actually this. Step back, breathe, and take in multiple opinions, a lot of different information. I mean, you cannot escape the hard data. Opinions are one thing, but look at specs, look at what they really are, and then decipher for yourself what is important to you. And if you're really not tech savvy, look at what you're trying to do and what specs affect that. You want to shoot sports, you're worried about fast frames per second, then you're going to be looking at how fast frames per second a camera can deliver. Is it 12, 15, 30 frames per second? What is it? And what is the caveat? Are you able to shoot RAW? Is it compressed RAW? Is it only JPEG? There's always something. A spec doesn't go up without some sort of cost to it. And one of the most, one of the most overhyped specs since the beginning of digital has been resolution. So just to give you an idea of where you should really watch that there's no like golden unicorn here, the higher the resolution of a camera, you're always going to have a massive trade-off with things like data processing. So frames per second usually drops pretty hard, which is why flagship cameras are usually lower res, but faster. Now we're kind of getting processors that can handle that. The problem is that even if it's a full frame sensor, the more resolution you pack onto a sensor, you deal with things like noise and high ISO, which some people will process in post to get it out of there, fine. But the one thing that they don't realize is that you're trading off all this, one of the things you're trading off is diffraction. This is just giving you an example of how there's always a caveat. If you have a super high res sensor and that camera company is telling you that you need this, well, do the research on diffraction and go, wait, I can't shoot past f5.6 before I start losing detail. So then that high resolution is canceled out because I'm closing down my lens. Well, if you're a commercial photographer in a studio and you're closing down to f8, f11, that resolution quickly starts not being a thing for you. It starts deteriorating because that's the nature of that spec. There's always a trade-off. And then you got to look at the philosophy of the brand with that. Are they really pushing that resolution more and more? Is that something you even care about? If you're someone that's more like a sports shooter, a news shooter, maybe you care about having a middle of the road sensor, like 24 megapixel, 33 megapixel, so it's cleaner and lower light, and you're able to transfer smaller files faster, whatever it is. That's kind of something that's a thing out there with those specs. Or you can look at some cameras that I think are very exciting where they're higher res, sure, but then they are able to morph the sensor with pixel binning to make it go from 60 megapixels to 30 megapixels, and it actually does make a difference. So that's a philosophy. All these things are the philosophy of the brand and what they're producing. And keep in mind, a lot of these decisions in those cameras took about 2 years to get to your hands. R&D is a 2-year minimum cycle on a camera body. So, and it's longer on lenses and lighting and who knows what else. So the decisions they made were based on predictions of where the market would be, what technology would be relevant, compatibility, parts that will be available, will it be cost effective and able to be brought to consumer at a price that's even accessible. It goes on. And I'm sure this video has been going on and on. And because that's the way I do things, is one take off the top of my head and we just go for it. And that's how I shoot, and that's why I like to do this channel. So if you're into that, go ahead, hit subscribe, come join us. I'm sure this was a lot, but I think you really need to take a step back, forget all the noise, look at the hard specs, look at what you're trying to do, where you think you're going to go, and then look at where that brand went, right? So think about if you were that person 10 years ago, how did that brand evolve? And think about what they're going to do for the next 10 years now. You know, it's a very telling point. So, oh, and you know, you might even care that they're not even just a camera company. You might like that they are bigger than cameras and you like an entire ecosystem of other electronics that it works well with. I mean, there's some major players in this game. Try not to name brands, but you guys know who I'm talking about, where, you know, things just work together because they're bigger than just a camera company. And maybe that gives them enough brand power to deliver things. Or look at their sensor technologies. Are they keeping up with things? Are they in the game that you're trying to play? All right, this was way too long. I'm sorry. This is what it goes, man. But do me a favor, hit like, drop me a comment down below. Let me know what things you consider when buying your equipment. Let me know what stuff you shoot, what you shoot with, what you like, what you would like to see come to fruition to the market. And don't forget, you can join the Discord where you can share some work and keep this conversation going 24/7 with a lot of people just like you. No trolls, no fanboys. We keep it clean in there and we help each other, and it's all free. I got nothing to sell you. This video is not sponsored. I got nothing, kids. Like this is as genuine as it gets. So I want to thank you guys for joining me here. You can check out my work on Instagram, yell at me on Twitter or X. What are they calling it? I would call it Twitter. And you can join me here on this channel live when I pop on live, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you so much, guys. Later.